Hello reception children. Our theme for next week is Hansel and Gretel. We'll be setting lots of different home learning challenges around this book. I thought I'd take this opportunity to read you the story Hansel and Gretel. This is my daughter's book and she absolutely loves this story. Hansel and Gretel. Hunger in the forest. Hansel and Gretel heard their stepmother shout, "Dinner!" and came running. It was only a slice of bread, but they were starving. Their stepmother looked even more grumpy than usual. "What do you expect?" she snapped. "With so little money, all we can afford is bread." The children's father sighed. "It's not my fault no one buys wood anymore," he said. "What with electric fires and plastic furniture." Hansel and Gretel finished the last crumbs on their plates and went to their room. "Poor Dad," yawned Hansel, "always in trouble." He blew out the candle and they tried to sleep. Suddenly, "What's that noise?" asked Gretel in a panic. "Sorry," said Hansel. "It's my tummy. I was thinking of melted chocolate and toasted marshmallows." "Oh, don't," Gretel begged. "I'm so hungry I can't sleep." As they listened to their tummies rumble, they heard more nagging downstairs. "The problem is," their stepmother was saying, "there's just not enough food for the four of us. The children will have to go." "What?" cried the poor woodcutter. "Do you have a better idea?" she sneered. The woodcutter fell silent. "Tomorrow we'll take Hansel and Gretel deep into the forest," his wife continued, "and leave them there." "But," began the woodcutter, sounding very sad. "But what? You never know. Someone will find them and take them home." Chapter 2, Pebble Path. That night, Gretel had nightmares about monsters in the woods. "I'm scared," she said from under the covers. "What are we going to do?" "Don't worry," said Hansel, who was lying wide awake. "I have an idea." Quietly, he tiptoed outside. White pebbles gleamed in the moonlight. He collected as many as he could and stuffed them into his pockets. "Wake up, my little sugar plums," called the stepmother soon after dawn. "We're going on a lovely walk today." Hansel squeezed Gretel's hand as they left the house, pretending they knew nothing. "Hurry up, Hansel," said his stepmother after a while. She didn't see him drop pebbles one by one behind him. The sad woodcutter walked on ahead, his head down and his shoulders hunched. "Perhaps the children should rest," said the stepmother finally. They were standing in a gloomy clearing. "You two sit here while your father and I, cut some wood." "I'll make you a fire first," said the woodcutter. "Go on," called his wife impatiently, and she dragged her husband into the forest. A ghostly mist hung over the clearing. Hansel warmed his hands by the fire. "Cheer up, Gretel," he said, trying to smile. They lay down on some squishy moss and were soon fast asleep. "Wake up!" cried Gretel, shaking Hansel. "It's already dark and I'm freezing." "What? Where?" said Hansel, looking around him. The mist had gone and the pebble gleamed in the moonlight. "Let's go," he said, taking Gretel's hand. His pebble trail led them through the shadowy forest and all the way home. Chapter 3, A Trail of Crumbs. "Hansel, Gretel," called the woodcutter in surprise. The stepmother heard their names and froze. "Drat," she snarled, "they're back." "We're starving," moaned Hansel. "Well, I didn't save you any lunch or dinner," said his stepmother. "What about breakfast?" Gretel asked. "Here, you can have my bread," said the woodcutter. His wife scowled at him. That evening, Hansel and Gretel were relieved to be in their own room, but they didn't trust their stepmother at all. With his ear to the door, Hansel heard the stepmother's voice grow louder. "We'll take them deeper into the forest this time," she declared. "They'll never find their way out." "You heartless woman," muttered the woodcutter. "What?" she barked. "Do you want us all to starve?" Hansel and Gretel lay trembling in their beds. When all was quiet, Hansel crept off to find more pebbles. But he couldn't open the front door. His stepmother must have locked it. "Wakey, wakey, rise and shine," said the stepmother early next morning. She forced Hansel and Gretel out of bed, gave them a slice of stale bread to share, and marched them into the forest. Hansel's tummy was grumbling, but he didn't eat his half of the bread. Instead, he crumbled it along the way to leave a second trail. Soon the trees were so thick they blocked out the sky. "Another lovely place for a rest," said their stepmother cheerfully. The woodcutter sighed and made a fire. He couldn't bear to look at his children. "Don't panic," Hansel said to Gretel when they were alone. "We can follow the breadcrumbs home." He turned to see a blackbird pecking at a crumb. "Shoo!" he cried, chasing the bird away. A woodpecker swooped down and took another crumb. "No!" shouted Hansel. Birds twittered from every tree. Hansel and Gretel looked for more crumbs, but not a single one was left. "What do we do now?" asked Gretel, shivering. Chapter 4. The Hidden House. By morning, Hansel still didn't have a plan. "Let's just walk until we find the edge of the forest," suggested Gretel. All day they walked past tall trees and spiky branches. Night fell and still they stumbled on. By the following morning they were faint from hunger. The spooky forest seemed to go on forever. At noon they finally staggered into a clearing. There in the distance stood a little house. "Let's see if anyone's in," said Gretel. "They might give us some food." As the pair neared the house, a delicious smell wafted past. "Freshly baked cakes," cried Gretel. She ran closer and gasped. The walls were made from chunks of cake, and the roof was glistening chocolate. "It looks scrumptious," she said, hardly believing her eyes. "And tastes even better," mumbled Hansel, already munching on a windowsill. Even the windows smelled sweet. Gretel licked one. "It's sugar." Hansel was trying to bite off the toffee apple door knocker when the door flew open. "Ah!" he yelled as an old woman hobbled out. She was as wide as a barrel and uglier than a toad, her bulging eyes fixed on the two children, and she smiled, showing her rotten teeth. "Enjoying my house, are you?" she croaked. "Yes, it's delicious. Delightful," said Gretel, quickly wiping chocolate from her face. "You must come inside," said the old woman. Chapter 5. Tricked. Hansel and Gretel couldn't believe their luck. In seconds, the kind woman laid out a magnificent meal for them. "Would you like to stay the night?" she said. Hansel and Gretel could only nod. Their mouths were full of cookies and candy. Gretel woke up to see sun streaming into Hansel's bed, but Hansel wasn't there. "I bet he's already eating breakfast," she thought, and ran to join him. "You're just in time to help me cook," croaked the old woman, no longer smiling. Gretel politely peeled potatoes, chopped carrots, and grated cheese. The ugly woman bossed Gretel around all morning until she was prepared a feast. "Now put it through the hatch in the shed outside," the woman ordered. Gretel was confused. She went outside and heard her brother yelling from the shed. "Hansel, what's happened?" called Gretel. "That woman's a witch," he shouted. "She trapped me with a spell. Now she wants to fatten me up and eat me." A cold shiver crept up Gretel's spine. "Don't worry," she said. sounding braver than she felt. We'll trick her and escape. Chapter 6. Into the Oven. That evening the witch hobbled over to Hansel's shed. "Hold out your finger," she shouted. "Show me how plump you are." She reached into the hatch and Hansel held up a twig. "Dear me," sighed the witch, "you're all bone. Eat more, boy." For days she made poor Gretel cook enormous meals. Hansel ate every mouthful, but his twig finger never got any fatter. Hansel and Gretel's plan was working, but the witch was growing impatient. "Plump or skinny, I'm meeting your brother tomorrow," she announced one evening. Gretel lay awake all night. "I won't let that horrible witch near my brother," she thought. "Gretel," the witch shouted at dawn, "get inside the oven and check how warm it is." "No," Gretel replied. "What?" cried the witch. I can't fit in there." "Of course you can, you silly little brat." By now the witch was very annoyed. "My oven is huge," she said. "Look, even I can fit inside." And with a puff and a pant she clambered in. Quick as a flash, Gretel slammed the door shut. As the wicked witch frazzled in her own oven, her spell on the shed was broken. "Gretel!" called Hansel, running into the house. "You've saved me!" Safe at last, Hansel and Gretel searched the witch's house for goodies. They took some jewels and a basket of snacks, then set off into the trees. Taking pity on Hansel and Gretel, the birds showed them the way home. The woodcutter was overjoyed to see them. As for their stepmother, she wasn't there. "Look, Dad," said Gretel, showing him the jewels. "You don't need to worry now. We can have a feast every night, and a new toffee door knocker each day," added Hansel. The end. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope that helps you with your home learning challenges for this week. Goodbye.